Beanie, welcome to the podcast. Long overdue. We've chatted so many times, but this is the deep dive. This is where the tears come. This is where introspection happens. We're getting deep.
Finally,
It's happening. It's all happening. Congratulations on everything. A lot to discuss today. Happy New Year as we tape this. Lashana Tova. I mean, this is meant to be.
I wish I had my apples and my honey, but they're sadly in the other room.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a couple hours away from dipping mine as well. But yeah, it's a big day. This is also the day as we tape this that the show debuts. How are you feeling just generally right now?
I think it feels completely and utterly surreal. I know it's such a common word, but it sums it up, man. It sums it up. It feels surreal. I first found out that I would be playing the role and a part of the production in June 2019. I was 25. I'm 28 now. So it's been a really long time. And we also filmed the entirety of the show during the depths of the pandemic. And now all of a sudden the sun is shining. I'm in New York and the show's coming out. I didn't know if we'd ever see this day. So it feels like
Well, and not to mention that, so I ran into you just a few weeks ago when, wait, can I still hear you? Can you
hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry. Not to mention that I ran into you just a few weeks ago. They debuted just a portion of the show for some of us here in New York, and I learned that you were actually still shooting it. So this is like, did you finish shooting like 3 days ago? This is also an odd circumstance.
Look, if this is the craziest thing that happened, we're in a global pandemic.
Right.
So we are
all bets are off on crazy stuff. Yeah, exactly.
As best we can. We're lucky that everyone's safe and happy, and that's the most important thing. But we didn't finish till 2 weeks ago. So we shot for 10 full months, 170 shooting days, which the longest film I'd ever shot, I think, was 40 days. So it was completely new territory for me. And yeah, we were filming up until people were already seeing it, certain people, as you said, by the time we were still very much filming the 10th episode. So it was crazy.
That's a weird circumstance where people are, I imagine people aren't necessarily giving you like feedback, but like at the same time, you are hearing some kind of like reviews of a nature and you're like, wait, I'm still making it. Should I be adjusting according to what I'm hearing, or is it too late? And by then you've decided what this character is, how you're approaching it. You can't change what you're doing.
Totally. I think some shows, network shows that have been on a long time are very used to that dynamic. But
right.
For me, coming from mostly theater and films, I was new to TV in general, let alone that kind of, it's very unique for a series of our nature to be
yes.
a part of something like that.
So I haven't contextualized it. I'm going to lose my job immediately. Unfortunately, I employ myself on the podcast, so nobody can fire me. But we're of course talking about American Crime Story Impeachment, and this remarkable story, ripped from history, in which Beanie plays, of course, Monica Lewinsky. When I think of you as a performer, I feel like you're a joyous performer. You take so much joy and happiness in what you do. And the nature of this role, and you kind of intimated this already, it's a long shoot. It's an intense kind of character going through a lot of really, upsetting circumstances. Were you able to take quote unquote joy in this process, or was it a different kind of a joy or satisfaction?
Well, first of all, that is very kind, and it means a great deal to me that you would say that. That is, yes, I think that, in many ways where Monica and I were very similar as far as like our upbringings, in that we both grew up Jewish, West Side LA, doing like musical theater at our local high school and like community theaters. But the other thing that I think we really share intrinsically is kind of this gregariousness, a love of people, Monica was always described then, and I can attest now as well, that she lights up a room. Like she had this inner energy that would just shine a light on whoever was around her. And so in that way, the beginning of the story, before Monica meets any of the other major players, we were very similar in that way of like our demeanor and the way that we relate to people, and we're very people loving, we're very outgoing and extroverted. So when Monica was in that space, it was incredibly kind of natural and very intrinsic and very joyful. You know, she's in a place at the beginning of, not necessarily actually in the first episode, but chronologically in 1995 when she comes to DC. She graduated from college in Portland a month before she comes to DC. So she's in that moment where I think any of us that are old enough to know that feeling, like, completely understand. You've just graduated college, and who are you in the world? You know
Yeah.
who you are within the institution of home and family and school, but who are you as an adult in the world for the first time? And it's that really exciting, nerve-wracking, kind of like bubbly, delicious spot in your life where you're becoming an adult in truth for the first time. And
Right.
so that connective tissue was very easy, and it was also very joyful. And then it was sort of the unraveling of that feeling that you kind of watch Monica go through, obviously under very specific circumstances throughout the show. And she does experience a lot of pain, betrayal, trauma, and those were very new for me to explore on screen.
Right.
But the beginning Monica, the 1995 kind of exuberant, thoughtful, smart, all of those attributes.
Yeah.
She comes into her internship possessing. I felt like were very joyful and very kind of natural.
It's funny because like I've talked to so many actors that have worked with Ryan Murphy, and he's obviously the one that instigates this project and brings it to you, and they love Ryan like to a man. Everybody just like adores Ryan, and I think I get why in a number of respects, and one of them occurs to me in that, like, for instance, like Sarah Paulson's work with Ryan, like who but Ryan has given her the opportunity to show so many different sides of what she can do. I mean, you only need to look, honestly. I mean, she's done so much more, but like the work she's done with Ryan alone is like the spectrum of acting. And similarly for you, we've never seen you in, like you just kind of alluded to, like these kind of like, especially these darker portions as she kind of like gets, embroiled in this. It must be so invigorating and inspiring for you as an actor when someone like Ryan Murphy calls you up and says, I want to see you do something you haven't done in a project of this nature.
Yes, you nailed it. You get it. But it was exactly that. It was, all I ever want in my working life and in my personal life too is to be challenged, to kind of, what's the next thing, what's the next story or character that's gonna make me raise my own stakes and raise my own game and push me outside of my comfort zone. And whether it's a shift in medium or a shift in genre or a type of story I've never told before, that's what you always look for, is that, like, you don't want to be too comfortable because then you're not growing and you're not learning. So when Ryan called me and said, do you want to play Monica Lewinsky and be a producer on the project, it was like handing that delicious kind of otherworldly challenge, because it was something that I remember. There was a moment when we were filming a sequence that is actually the very opening sequence of the show, and then we return to that moment in the 6th episode, which is when Linda has led Monica to the mall to be taken by the FBI into a hotel room with the Office of Independent Counsel. And we were filming a shot of me and Sarah and Brian and Craig, who are 2 FBI agents, in the elevator. And I remember looking at her, I looked at Paulson, who's become, deeper than family to me at this point. It's like older sister, younger sister. She's like one of the great loves of my life. And I looked at her and I was like, this is a drama.
Right.
And she was like, hello. And I was like, no, I know it is, because of all the, of course, just naturally it is a drama. But and then through all my research, I found the research really painful and difficult to do all the time, because it was so heavy and dark and upsetting to me as a young woman reading about what happened to Monica and the unraveling of her friendship and all the other dynamics that play in the show. So of course I knew, but it was kind of for the first time that it struck me in the day-to-day moment of the acting, of being on set, that I was like, I've genuinely never done this before. I've
Right.
never done this before. And the depth and the pain and the intense humanity of what Monica had to go through, specifically in that episode, but also beyond it and before it. It was kind of jaw dropping to me. I just couldn't quite believe, even growing up, some musicals are very emotional and very dark and dramatic, but I didn't even often do those musicals. Like, I was doing mostly musical comedy, and then I did Our Town and the Laramie Project, and I did classic plays, but always in a school setting.
Right.
And always, even then, people would be like, outside your comfort zone, Bean. I'd be like, I get it, okay. And it was interesting because it actually, it was incredibly challenging in so many ways, but also felt really beautiful, and it was such a powerful experience for me to get to portray.
One of the other, very unique aspects of a production like this, and I know you've talked about it a lot, but it's something that I'm sure is important to you, is that you even told me when I ran into you that you view yourself as kind of Monica's bodyguard to a certain extent. She's a producer on this as well. And for me, watching I just watched the first 5 episodes, and to watch and reevaluate just how she was treated and how she was vilified and at the center of this madness back then is just fascinating. And I think anyone my age will feel like complicit. Like, did we laugh at the monologue jokes? Did we it's really disturbing in many aspects. But for you, having this unique opportunity to not only play her, but to have access to her and to form this kind of bond with her. Talk to me a little bit about how that relationship has evolved. Like, what is the nature of the relationship? Like, let me pick your brain about this, or is it more less specific in terms of how you guys work together?
It's the second one. It's the second one for sure.
Yeah.
I think people understandably have this vision of me calling her before every scene, right, and like, Monica, tell me this. Also, you have to remember, again, this is someone's life and this is someone's trauma. So I didn't really think that it was, it didn't feel needed for me to call her and say, can you just relive that trauma for me really quickly over the phone? That's not
right. Do me a solid and go to this darkest period in your life and tell me what you were feeling. Yeah.
She always says that she watches the show from 2 different perspectives. One is producerially and one is as a subject. And she's like, right, as a subject, we're incredibly difficult. And as a producer, I'm incredibly proud. And both of those things can be true at the same time. But for me, I did, before I even got to meet Monica, so Ryan called me in June 2019, and then I didn't meet Monica until March 2020. So in those, 9 months, I did an intense, deep dive amount of research. Our wonderful researcher on the show gave each of us a Dropbox that had all the information we could need, all the text that we would need, all the transcripts of the depositions, every video. And that Dropbox, till 2 weeks ago, was my best friend in the world. And so I had read everything. I had listened to the tapes, which I found to be a very emotionally dense and intense experience. And so by the time I met Monica, I felt so deeply understanding of what she had gone through my research and through reading the incredible scripts by Sarah Burgess, who I think is just such a genius. And so by the time I met her, it was more important for me that she understood who I was as a person and where my heart lies and where my intentions lie, and that she could trust me, because I can only imagine someone that has been through what she's been through, that she might not trust people very easily. And I think, I just wanted her to know that I had her back. As you said, I felt very protective of her. I'm her bodyguard, or her little 5'1" Jewish bodyguard. And so it was more loose or honestly cozy. It was just, I just wanted her to feel comfortable with me, and for it to feel like a reciprocated relationship, because I also could imagine if someone had studied me for 9 months and then came in with a pen and paper, it would feel like, can I get to know you too? I'm some type of person that would be like, tell me about you, just so it feels a little bit even on both sides. But I wanted details. I wanted details that I couldn't find in books, and that weren't on the tapes, and I had never heard her talk about. So like a lot of the photos were in black and white. Like, what nail polish color were you wearing at the time? Like in the first scene, Monica orders coffee, so I'm like, we got to get that coffee order right. Her best friend Catherine features in the show. First of all, I wanted to know more about their dynamic. That was kind of off the page, or I couldn't find in detail. But then also, like, do you call her Kath? Do you call her Kathy? Do you call her Kat? Like these specific things that even I remember once texting her, like, did this grandma give you this necklace, or did the other grandma? Like, was it your dad's side? You know, just little details like that that really make a human being feel human and not like a bundle of bullet points or research. You know, you want to. So it was, but again, I really did not think it was necessary. I understood what my job was. I didn't think it was necessary to make her have to relive those experiences with me before every scene. It would just be, it's 170 days. It would have been too much. So yeah, there were weeks where we would text off, and there would be weeks where we'd both be off doing our own things, and then I'd text her and be like, so did you call this grandma Puppy or Buffalo? What, I can't remember what you, and she'd be like, you know, weigh in. But she was very involved with the script. She gave a lot of notes on the scripts. So by the time the scripts reached me, I knew that specifically about Monica, when Monica appears on the page, that it had been, you know, felt honest and true to what Monica herself went through. So yeah, I think that was a deeply long-winded answer to
No. It's all very, very fascinating, and I think people will be curious to hear about it. One aspect that I'm curious to hear about is, you know, my sense is from our past conversations and following each other on social media, we share a lot of the same politics, and it's a complicated relationship. I feel like a lot of people have with like the Clintons, and when you take on a project like this, like, the likelihood of, this is a superficial kind of like the least of your worries in some respects, but like the likelihood of you being friends now with Chelsea Clinton or Hillary Clinton have probably gone down significantly thanks to your participation in this project. They're probably not anxious to see this dramatized, and who knows if they'll ever watch it. Is that even a consideration? Like, I, in some ways, admire what these folks have done politically, and I feel shitty about kind of dredging it up for them and knowing that they're going to hate it in a way.
I think that, you know, I think if you look, as you said, we follow each other on social media. I campaigned for Hillary Clinton. I voted very openly and actively. Again, I campaigned for Hillary. And I also simultaneously think that what happened to Monica and Linda Tripp and Paula Jones, not just singularly Monica, but all three of the women, in the 90s, the treatment that they experienced by our society through the media was so misogynistic and so dehumanizing and a caricature of a person, lacked all humanity. And I think that those things can be true at the same time.
Right.
I believe in complexity. I believe in things not being black or white or this or that, but there being a lot of, you know, I feel like the greatest thing about human beings is that we're mushy and we're messy and we're complicated, and that we can exist in multitudes, you know? And I think the fact that I campaigned and voted for Hillary is something that I'm very proud of. And the fact that I'm playing Monica Lewinsky and giving her story back to the world is something that I'm very proud of. And both of those things can be true at the same time.
Yeah. I want to take this opportunity, since we do have some time, to take a step back and kind of look at where you're at and where you've come from, because, you know, it's only been a few short years since you've been doing this professionally, but it's been exciting to kind of see you and talk to you at these very exciting kind of points of.
For my first interview ever, I think.
Maybe that was on, so we were on the set.
Definitely first on-set interview for sure.
Well, I'm honored that I was in the right place at the right time. So that was on the set of Neighbors 2, and I'm curious in a few respects. Like, on that front, that was your first film, I believe, right?
My first in earnest, for sure.
Right. So you waited though, like you graduated college. You, like, despite like everything I know about you is like you practically came out of the womb like ready to like sing and dance and entertain. Yeah, totally. So you were lucky enough to have that certitude, yet you didn't pursue it professionally prior to then, even having an older brother who succeeded and seen that path. Like, I'm just curious, like, your mindset of like why you waited. That was clearly a decision.
It was. It was totally a decision, and I remember I went to Wesleyan University in Connecticut. I loved it, an insane amount. But I remember getting very emotional, surprisingly, on graduation day when I held. Well, you don't really hold your diploma till like a few weeks later, but you hold the cake, right?
Right.
And walking across and hearing my name and my family being there, and I remember getting emotional because I wasn't sure it would come. And it mattered a lot to me. So to answer your question, um, I love to act, I love to sing, I love to dance, and I also really love school. And I'm a very academic person. And I think my relationship with academics kind of ebbed and flowed throughout my childhood. I didn't always believe in myself as an academic because I was such a performer. It was sometimes like, oh, well, I don't have time to do this because I'm doing X, Y, and I'm taking dance and I'm taking singing and I'm performing. And okay, it's okay if, my essay isn't as good because look, I'm performing in this show. I'm talking school theater, community theater. I'm not talking like Broadway. But I think sometimes when you're growing up and you have such an intense passion, that passion can be put up against school, almost like you have to choose. And whether it's sports or whatever it is, for me, it was performing. But I think sometimes it's like an either or situation.
Right.
And I subscribe to that ideology a lot growing up of like, well, if I'm a performer, it's okay if I don't value school. But there was always this voice in the back of my head that was like, you really love school. And you've always been an academic person. And you need to honor that side of yourself. So by the end of by the end of high school, I started to kind of believe in myself again as an academic person. And I just had a real kind of heart to heart with myself. And I was like, I could go to a drama school. I could easily get a BFA. That was something that I knew was within my reach as far as getting into some BFA program somewhere. But I wanted to honor that academic side of myself.
Right.
And finally give her, I think, the kind of time and commitment that I never did always growing up. So I decided to go to a school with amazing arts, with an incredible art scene and student run theater and every kind of, like the dance, the music, everything at Wesleyan it's just like brimming with artistic energy. But I really wanted to put my scholar hat on and be an academic person for a while. And I almost transferred to a school in the city. I almost transferred to Barnard only because I wanted to be closer to acting opportunities. And I said, again, and heart to heart number 2. And I was like, no, stay. You love it here. Stay. Just do this. It'll all work out. Just commit yourself to this. And look, I'm so someone that believes that every person has their own path. Like some people in my family are super academic and others are arguably just as smart, if not way smarter, but just never succeeded in the classroom setting and didn't go to college. And like, who gives I don't care at all. But for me, that setting was something that I craved. And so I was like, acting will be there, which was a hard decision to make because I look super young. So I could have played like 14, 15 when I was 18, and I could have auditioned for all these roles that are, when you're old enough and you don't have to go to school and all this. There were so many people saying like, just do it, just go for it now. But I really wanted to value that side of myself that needed to see something through in a way that I hadn't always. And I'm so grateful to Wesleyan, and I'm really proud of my younger self for kind of committing to that. And I got emotional when I got my degree because I was like, wow, I could have quit so many times.
Oh my God. It's such an unusual path for a young person nowadays where I feel like there's so much impatience to like, when do I get mine? When do I, especially in your field, like when do I, and certainly this wasn't your aspiration, but when do I get famous? When do I get the likes? When do I get the adulation? And it's really telling that you were able to kind of like stave that off and stay true to a different part of yourself for as long as you did.
Totally. It's like that, I received back to my studies, but my social scientist in me, but that video of the kids with the marshmallows that are like, have you ever seen it? It's all about delayed gratification. And it's like, they put marshmallows in front of kids and they're like, if you don't touch it or eat it, when I come back in 20 minutes, you can have 2. But if you eat it now, you can't have another one. And it's all like a study in delayed gratification. So yeah, I like sat on my hands and didn't eat the marshmallow right away. And
Good for you. I would have eaten the marshmallow, the stick, the hand it was attached to. I'm not that strong. I'm curious, like, okay, so we've talked before and we've alluded to today, obviously your interest in musical theater and song and dance, jazz hands, etc. But like when I asked you for a comfort movie, you gave a few different choices, and we pinpointed one that I want you to dive a little bit deep on today. But none of them are musicals. Although I guess, well, one of them has a big musical aspect to it. But talk to me a little bit. Just first, talk to me a little bit about who you were. Like, did you have an eclectic love of pop culture, or were you like, as a teenager, like all about musical theater, or did you kind of love it all?
I would say I was like a pretty classic theater geek.
Yeah. Okay. Own it. Yeah.
Like, sitting home and watching Broadway.com, like opening night videos, and like that was my shtick. And yeah, Jonah and I always joke because he's like, "You're so not a cinephile," and I'm like, "But ask me anything about Sondheim." Like, it's just different. I'm really not a cinephile. I feel like I'm learning so much more about being on camera and making movies and now making television in my 20s. But growing up, I had such a singular focus, and it was musical theater and Broadway. So yeah, that was like my deep, intense fandom growing up.
So the ones, let's first mention just the runners up, just to give them a little love. I think one previous guest has cited maybe Matilda. I'm not sure. Or no, I talked to, who I talked to recently? I talked to Daisy Ridley, who was also obsessed with Matilda, and I surprised her with now I'm blanking on the actress's name, the amazing actress Mara Wilson, yes. And it blew Daisy's mind. I surprised her with that. You also mentioned, I mentioned a musical bent. You mentioned School of Rock, the great Richard Linklater film with Jack Black, etc. Fantastic. All worthy choices. But the one that we're going to talk about a little bit is a great one that I'm surprised hasn't come up yet.
They sent me the list of everyone that's been on the show recently, and I was like scanning and looking for it, and no one chose it. So I was like,
I got it. So what's your pick? And tell us a little bit in brief just why it's such a comfort movie for you.
Well, I would say it's my everything movie. Comfort is only one of the terms I would put to it, but like I did say the words earlier today, it changed my life, and I believe that it did, which is Bridesmaids. Anyone that has ever talked to me for about 4 minutes would know that it's one of the great loves that I have. I think that, well, comforting in the sense that the aspect of it that's so comforting is the honest, true depiction of female friendships, which obviously is something that I'm very committed to in my work and more importantly in my life. But just the rapport and the comfort and the chemistry between Maya and Kristen, and all of them really, but centrally those two, it just is so comforting. It feels like looking into a future version of me and several of my friends, but that movie came out, well, most movies come out on Fridays, but the Thursday midnight showing, I went with Ben, my best friend, Ben Platt, and then all of our other high school friends, Max, Anna, Nick, all of us. And we went at midnight, and it was the last week of high school that it came out. And I literally have never, like to this day, there are a few movie going experiences that I've had that have ever even come close, because I laughed so hard I literally slid off my chair like into the popcorn that was on the floor. But also I got that feeling that people talk about of like feeling seen, right? They hear it all the time. Never felt seen like that in my whole life. And it was interesting because I was watching, in preparation for our discussion today, I was watching some clips. Well, it's also just comforting to me, right? So I was watching some clips, and on YouTube, there was a suggested video. I couldn't think of that term. There was a suggested video for Melissa McCarthy and Rose Byrne, and a junket interview that they gave when the movie was coming out. And I clicked on it because I hadn't seen it before, which was rare for me. And the first question asked was I think it's a British reporter, was like, so we hear this movie is like the female version of The Hangover. And I could not believe my ears. And I think that it was such a perfect way for me to like situate it in the history of comedy, in the most recent history of comedy, but also help explain why it means so much to me, because little did I know at the time, little would I have ever known that I would eventually be in a movie like Booksmart, where, understandably because of who my brother is, the first question out of everyone's mouth was like, we hear this is the female Superbad.
Right.
But it was crazy to me that Bridesmaids got that treatment. And I think it just goes to show, like, for a young woman that at that point didn't even want to be in movies. Like, I just wanted to be on Broadway, but that wanted to make people laugh, that made her friends laugh, whose friends made her laugh, was just a young girl growing up with best friends, and that relationship being like the funniest part of her life were those friendships. It just was so moving. It was so moving to see so many different types of women and that are funny in all different ways. It wasn't like the movie is doing one thing comedically. It's doing so many different things. And I will tell you the infamous story, my infamous bridesmaid story in my family, which is that the Oscar nominations that year were announced. And my mom called me and she was like, can you believe the news? And I was hysterically crying. And I said, because Melissa McCarthy's nominated for Bridesmaids. And she goes, no, because your brother's nominated for Moneyball. And I was like, that too.
I mean, amazing.
But personally, his nomination mattered. But for my career, like as far as inspiration goes, being recognized for that type of role was something, and for the script to be recognized, like it was beyond my wildest dreams. I was like, people care. People actually care, and want to celebrate this movie, and that meant everything to me. So that's my really long-winded answer.
No, I mean, please, all of that is brilliant and wonderful, and it really does resonate, even though it's obviously not. I don't have the same like connection. I've had that experience just watching, frankly, secondhand other people's stories told on the screen for the first time. I mean, I remember in a totally different, weird way, like when I saw Wonder Woman and I see like the opening sequence, and I'm like, why am I like tearing up? It's like, I've never seen this kind of a action scene photographed this way, and it really is inspiring in recent years. Like a lot of it is, frankly, I think of, because the way my head is oriented is in these kind of blockbusters, which I love, but like you think of Black Panther and recently Shang-Chi and whatever, and it's just something really beautiful about seeing people for the first time getting a chance to see their lives in some way depicted, and it's
incredibly important. It's incredibly important, and also like it's such connective tissue. Like that movie is what bonded me and Saoirse when we first met.
Right.
So we would quote it to each other literally all day, every day, on when we were filming Lady. But like it just becomes this. There's not a young person I know that identifies as female or non-binary that doesn't feel like they want to talk about that movie or quote that movie, like back and forth. It just is such an easy, delicious way to make someone laugh.
So what's it like for you now in the years since, and relatively few short years since? Like I think of something, certainly a lot of great moments from Booksmart, but also even like Lady Bird, you just mentioned, like it's the titular role is that quotable line now for kids. It's been memed and quoted probably every minute of every day. It must be really surreal, to go back to our original word, to be a part of that now.
Completely. I mean, Kristen Wiig was at the premiere of Booksmart, and Caitlin and I like grabbed not even each other's hands, like full arms. Like we were like, this is called the fireman's link. I don't even know what it's called. We were like grasping each other and like physically shaking. We were like, one of us has to go up to her. One of us has to. Which one is going to go together? Okay. And we were like shaking, and we like tapped her on the shoulder, and she was like, girls, and like gave us the biggest, but it was everything. I mean, it was literally everything to us. But yeah, the titular role thing makes me laugh so hard. I could never, and it also just goes to show you, because I remember being so nervous that day that we filmed that scene. It was the 3rd or 4th day of shooting. I left feeling like I didn't do Greta proud. I didn't do Saoirse proud. I was like, I could have done better. And, you know, so is everything that we are is, I think everyone that loves what they do and cares about what they do is always going to be self-critical. But I was like, I could have done better. And what if I didn't do enough? And what if she didn't have, you know, she doesn't have what she needs? And then that's the scene that becomes like, you know, the scene everyone always talks about. So you never know. And we sometimes don't know ourselves at all. Can't see, you know, outside ourselves. But Greta's a genius. That line is so funny. But yeah, it's surreal, and it's bizarre, but it's fun. I understand. I think it's funny too.
So much exciting stuff going on for you beyond, of course, this series. You've got what I know to be a very significant Broadway role for you, to say the least. The role you were practically born to play. You've been performing this in some fashion for 25 years or so. Funny Girl.
Yeah.
You're prepped. You're ready.
Well, my 3-year-old self certainly thought she was ready. My 28-year-old self is like, you have a lot of work to do. But yeah, I actually kind of, I don't know if I purposely didn't give you a comfort musical, but I feel like for me, listening to soundtracks is more of like the way I feel comforted by musicals, less watching the movie versions for some reason. But when I was growing up, the way that my friends would beg to watch Elmo or The Little Mermaid or, you know, Beauty and the Beast or whatever, I would just say Fanny Bryce on repeat to my mom, as every 2.5-year-old does. And I begged my mom to make the theme of my birthday party Funny Girl, which, you know, even most of the adults didn't understand at the party. But yeah, that's just who I was. As you said, I was very singularly focused from a very young age. But I also had nodules on my vocal cords as a kid, so
Oh, wow.
And never thought I'd ever be a singer because I could barely speak. So that part of it was a later discovery. But I yeah, it's talk about surreal. Like it's Fanny Bryce in Funny Girl, and it hasn't been on Broadway since 1964 with Barbra Streisand. So it's beyond my wildest.
It'll be a trip.
Yeah, it's beyond everything. But we haven't started yet. They haven't, you know, created the company of actors who are gonna I get to be with every night, the joy. But you know, doing Hello Dolly was, you started this conversation by talking about joy. It was like taking, like, if someone could put joy into a bottle and then just chugging it every night. Like, it was the most joyful, special experience, and those people are still some of the closest people in the world to me, were that company and that crew. And Broadway is a very, very, very special experience. And as an audience member, I'm just so grateful that the theaters are opening again, and that people get to be back in the theater, you know, completely separate from Funny Girl or from even being a performer myself as a fan, my original role. I'm just so excited, and I'm so happy. I think it's so restorative. Yeah. And I think theater is so, as you said, whether it's healing because it's showing a, you know, much like Monica Lewinsky's story, like showing a very untold story that needs to be told, or on the flip side, something that's nothing but joy and celebration and togetherness and community. I just think Broadway is like it's healing. It's so healing. It's healing for me to be in the audience. So I'm so glad I get to go back.
You know, having gotten to know your brother as well, obviously over the years, I know him to be an extraordinarily creative person in many respects, not just acting, but in writing and directing, et cetera. I see that you've written a bit. Like I read some of your essays. I mean, like a very moving one about, your brother, which, I mean, strikes me like you don't have to do something like that. That's something that like is a brave, like, thing to share with others. And I guess in the hopes of explaining that we all deal with grief in profound ways. But I mean, talk to me, is writing therapeutic for you? Do you find writing joyful in a different way than acting, or is it a different kind of a love, or what?
Totally. I think I love mostly nonfiction writing. Like that is what I kind of essays and kind of academic leading essays sometimes is more kind of my goal would be to write something that is very sociologically driven, but made palatable through like human experience.
Yeah.
And, I think I've written about bodies and I've written about feminism but that one that you were referencing was obviously the most difficult. But I think just like with any type of storytelling, it can make you feel less alone to read something that resonates and that feels profound. And specifically with grief, it can be such a lonely feeling experience. You feel like you're kind of walking through a world that no one understands. So writing that was really clarifying for me. And then I took the, sort of jump and put it out. And it's been really beautiful to hear people's responses. But yeah, I love to write. I think more in the way that I was saying than screenwriting as of now. That's not really something that I've gone into, but I also feel like, you can't really work with Greta Gerwig and Olivia Wilde and not be inspired. And you
Sure.
can't really be Jonah's sister and not be inspired. So all of that leads me to believe that someday I will do something along those lines. But, all of them actually say that being an actor is like the best film school you could possibly go to, and that we get the privilege of being on everyone's set and get to experience, now I have Ryan Murphy to add to the list and Stephen Karam and all of these incredible directors that I keep just getting to be a part of. Rachel Morrison directed some of Impeachment, and it's been so wonderful to just experience new people and be on different sets. I'm still in film school, if that makes sense. I'm not.
You're accumulating knowledge. No, I got you. Yeah.
I'm still kind of adding more people and more experiences to my learning, but I'm sure, again, you can't not be inspired by those experiences.
Well, I mean, one of the most exciting aspects as I wrap this up is that you are just getting started, and that this is just phase one, and and something like this, impeachment just represents another jump, another leap, another exciting new side of you to show off, and you do an amazing job in this, as does. I mean, we haven't even loved on Sarah Paulson, but that could be another whole hour, which she doesn't need it.
I need longer than 45 minutes to go down that path.
No, I'm with you.
16 hours to even skim the surface of my love. But she's a revelation on the show. And she's doing something so outside the realm of, it's such a ridiculously inspiring performance to have gotten to witness, be crafted. It's sort of, I'm always like, I can't handle you and you just need to go away because it's too much. It's too much and I'm done. So you're going to have to leave because it's too much good and we're just going to need to move away.
No, I hear it, because it's like you separate even just like the acting talent and the prowess out. She's also just happens to be funny and charming and smart and cool. And it's like, and then you're also one of the great actors on the planet. So this is just annoying.
Yeah, it's just like how, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on this. How
you can curse, it's fine.
Fucking lucky am I that I mean, like just I think, every project that I've done, feels like a masterclass. But the real human greatness of it is that I've left with a new family member.
Yeah.
And that to me is greater than any artistic understanding I could have come to. That Paulson is my family now. That is the greatest gift of it all. So
there you go. Well, congratulations again. Happy New Year to you. Happy premiere day for Impeachment. And I'm glad that we have you back in town. And hopefully you have a bit of a break before you start to tackle this event of a lifetime that you've been preparing for. I can't wait to see you on a stage with a big audience safely. It's good to see you as always, buddy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.